everyone. And welcome also to anyone who's joining us on the live stream. We're streaming out live and we've got cameras dotted about the room. So if we all want to give a kind of wave to the people in the virtual world. Hello, welcome. And just to let people who are joining us on the live stream know, if you click on the YouTube, you'll be able to leave comments and interact with us all. So please do that so we can hear from you. Well, thank you all so much for coming along. This is our second Tayside Climate Beacon event. We had a full house at the Webster Theatre in Arbroath last month with some really insightful discussions and presentations, and I know we're going to do exactly the same, if not more, tonight. My name's Martha. I'm a climate activist based in Dundee. I'm going to be trying my best to host us this afternoon, and what a pleasure it is, as always, to be in beautiful Dunkeld. I was camping a bit further up the road, just a little bit further up the road last weekend in Crannog, which is a favourite spot of mine. And we passed by Killiecrankie on the way, and can anybody guess what song we burst out into in the car? That's the one! I'm so glad somebody recognised that. Yes, we were burst out in song, which was brilliant. And I think not only does the landscape here leave everybody who experiences it in this kind of state of sublime awe that just fills up your soul, but of course it also tells stories about our history that we respond to culturally and that shape our identities and make us feel familiar with a place, that make it feel like home. And sometimes I think the people living here must have kind of extra charged souls, getting to spend so much time in this stunning landscape. What do you think? Would that be true to say? Yes. Extra charged souls? Yeah, people like me, city dwellers, we just don't get that, unfortunately. And I'm sure that plays no small part in there being such a strong sense of community here and stewardship over the landscape, and the fact that there's just such a real creative and innovative buzz coming out of not just Dunkeld, but the whole of Perth and Kinross more widely. And I think our fantastic speakers tonight are going to share a little piece of that buzz with us. But before we hear from them, I just want to give you a little bit of context about the Climate Beacons project, because Tayside is actually just one of 7 beacons all across Scotland that were created for COP26 as part of a Creative Carbon Scotland initiative, really aiming to foster collaboration on climate action and to create new responses to climate change that pull together different types of knowledge and understanding, ranging from the community, arts, cultural, heritage, policy and academic sectors. And that's really what the Tayside Beacon has tried to do with these 3 events, which have emerged out of a series of initial conversations from people across the area. And from those conversations, themes for each event started to take place. Last month in Arbroath, we had a theme of journey and migrations. That was what the people on the northeast coast felt really spoke to them. And tonight we're going to explore the connections between communities, culture and climate action through the work of telling stories and creating spaces. We're going to hear from community climate leaders in Perth and Kinross who are part of building these new vital spaces to collaborate and connect in. And we're also going to hear from some fantastic storytellers who are creatively weaving elements of the past with the present to reimagine the future and to compel us to act for a more livable world. And we're going to also have the chance to have a big panel discussion at the end with our lovely seats here. So please have a think as we go along if you've got any questions that you would like to ask our speakers, and you'll get the chance to do that. But before I introduce our first speaker, I would love to just take the next 5 minutes to get to know some of you lovely folks in our audience tonight, what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I'd also like to invite you, if you want, to share a bit about what makes you feel rooted in place or connected to the place that you live. What makes it feel like home or gives you a sense of community. And I'll give you a quick 20 seconds just to think about that. I'm going to try and grab this mic. 1, 2. Are we working? Hello, there we are. Would anybody like to introduce themselves? Once the first person goes, it breaks the ice and it gets a lot easier for everybody. Oh, fantastic. We've got a volunteer straight off the bat. That's what we like to see. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can depend on me to grab the mic. Yeah, Ewan Allinson, master craftsman, dry stone waller, sculptor, doing a PhD at the University of Dundee, DJ CAD, which was floundering until I marshalled forces beyond my ken, which have turned it into a giant 300,000 project called Working the Land, Knowing Its Grain, which is going to be taking place in Perthshire over the next 3 years, working with gamekeepers, gillies, stalkers, fencers, etc.
Wow, brilliant. And what makes you feel rooted in place?
Working in it.
Perfect answer. Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves? Thank you so much. I'll come round here. There we are. Thank you so much.
Hello there. My name's Graham. I work at the Scottish Crannog Centre, where mainly I run the apprenticeship scheme, but also I get a chance to tell stories quite often. I feel that telling the stories of people from 2,500 years ago is really important. I think the most important thing about it is we find there's not a lot of difference. And in fact, last weekend we did a sustainability weekend, and it really felt we've got a lot to learn from people of 2,500 years ago and what they went through in their story.
Yeah.
What roots me to the place? Simple, it's where I come from. It's where I went away from and came back to, and that's what roots me in the landscape. Yeah.
Brilliant, lovely to meet you. Anyone else? Maybe some ladies in the room? Fantastic. Brilliant.
Hello, I'm Leslie. I live in London, near Finsbury Park, and I work at Pitlochry Festival Theatre. I did 2 seasons there, then I was stuck in London for a couple of years, wrote something, I'm back here working on this season, and again, I can't believe how beautiful the place is and how wonderful the people are, and the things that make me feel at home or home are other people. I'm really, really glad I'm here this evening. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. Great to have you. Julie, anyone else? Anyone at the back over there? One more person? Can we go for one more person? Don't be nervous. Fantastic. Here we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Gyan and I'm a student at the University of Dundee. I study sustainability and climate change, and I'll be joining Creative Dundee very soon on an internship. And what was the question again?
What makes you feel rooted in place?
Right, so I've been in this, I'm from India originally, but I came to Scotland in 2018, and and ever since I've been traveling. So, and I've traveled a lot of Scotland across the country, and I feel I barely scratched the surface, and it's so beautiful. I think traveling makes me rooted to this place.
Thank you so much. I travelled around India for 4 months, and the trip of my life, fantastic. Okay, so thank you very much, brave people. Lovely to meet you. And with that, it's my absolute pleasure to invite our first speaker to the stage, which is Clare Cooper, my good friend. Clare is a kind of co-founder of Bioregioning Tayside, which is a fascinating new lens to help us look at place a bit differently. So let's give a warm welcome to Clare Cooper.
Oh, thank you, and it's really great to be here and see so many people. So, I wonder how many of you have heard of this term bioregion or bioregioning. Great. So Bioregioning Tayside is a new platform, as Martha said, which is bringing people together to build community resilience in the face of global heating, collapsing biodiversity, and a broken economic model. Crises a growing number of people, and everyone here and those joining us online, I know, are deeply concerned about. We aim to build that community resilience through the concept of a bioregion, a place where boundaries are defined first and foremost by natural, topographic and biological features rather than human-designed political or administrative boundaries. So our bioregion is based on the Tay River catchment, that is the red line on that map on the right-hand side, and lots of bioregions around the world are based on catchments, but they can also focus on mountain ranges, on marine environments and even deserts. So, bioregioning, the action that goes with that way of seeing the world, is a response to those interlinked crises, because it challenges us to see our place through its natural infrastructure instead of the infrastructure we've designed, transforming shires and cities into biomes and watersheds. It reinvigorates and restores how we humans think about our presence on this planet and how we act. And looking through a bioregional lens inspires us to reperceive our interdependence with the natural world in our place and bring us back into a healthy, balanced coexistence with each other. But it's not just that reframing from anthropocentric to ecocentric and the shift in values and what we value that goes with that makes bioregioning such a potentially powerful approach, I think. Or indeed its focus on landscape scale systems where, as John Muir so famously said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. It's the shift in power dynamics it advocates too, because in order to move forward in resolving the crises we face, everyone needs to be at the table on equal terms. And that means civil society as much as the market and the state. So what does bioregioning look like in practice? Well, here's a starter list. Land use changes that support healthy ecosystems, the enhancement and maintenance of biodiversity, something a lot of us are very familiar with, the restoration and regeneration of fresh and marine water systems, the design of new social and economic infrastructure that supports a well-being economy and a just transition. That's something I'm personally particularly interested in. Activities that promote organic and agroecological practices, that foster and enhance self-reliance and resilience, that shrink energy demand and reduce carbon emissions, scale down material production and consumption, and promote a sense of and care for place. And also then the use of appropriate technologies to help achieve all of those things. So what are we doing right now? Well, we're just getting going, and the first thing that we're doing is finding out who is already being bioregional in their practice in Tayside and building connections with them. You can see the beginnings of this work on the map on our website that Martha's been very involved with. And we know that there are many more stories out there, and we hope to tell them as quickly as our resources, currently all volunteers, actually allow. We're also bringing these existing bioregional practitioners and others together. And right now, that's happening through our very first learning journey, a series of events that have been designed around a set of questions that we found kept coming up in different ways as we've been talking to people. Just a couple of weeks back, our first learning journey event asked, what will be on my plate in 2042? We visited a commercial potato farm in Lunan Bay, heard about the much greater potential for agroforestry and organics in our local food supply chains, and finished up at the amazing peri-urban agricultural project Campy Growers that's just starting up on the outskirts of Dundee. Now, over the next few weeks, we'll be running 3 more events in this programme. Can tourism help Tayside race to zero? That's a very big question. What will I do when the waters rise, which will focus on flooding and how communities across Tayside can start to work together in different ways to manage and mitigate flood and extreme weather? And how can participatory science bring new solutions to ecosystem restoration? If any of you would like to come along to any of those events, 2 are online and 1 is in Ailith, then please let me know or ping me through the website and I can send you the invites to them. We're hoping to finish this first learning journey with a design workshop which will bring all that we've learnt together and consider whether, and if so how, Tayside could become a climate action sweet spot. There are some very interesting folk working in Scandinavia on this issue who we'd like to bring over, and essentially they're beginning to work out that certain kinds of climate action interventions at certain scales can create social tipping points which have the potential to change behaviour pretty rapidly. We're also trying to get a first tranche of live projects off the ground, so already supported by Nature Scott. One of these will be looking at how communities can help monitor landscape changes. And our biodiversity and carbon collective idea aims to develop a platform which will aggregate and sell carbon capture and biodiversity net gain on behalf of small landowners via a community wealth building business model. And we want to help grow a regenerative tourism approach across Tayside through a pilot with the Cateran Eco Museum, of which I'm also part. Regenerative tourism, in a nutshell, means to leave things better. So, hopefully, as we gather more resources, we'll aim to grow the bioregioning network across Tayside, help enable a wider range of bioregional projects to get going, share and learn from other bioregions across the world, which are getting going in all sorts of amazing places. And in England, there's something like 7 or 8 bioregions that are emerging now. We're the first in Scotland, but there are 2 others that are trying to get going in Murray and the Clyde. So have a look at our website for a bit more than I can tell you today. Help us map and connect to people, if you can, who are already being bioregional in Tayside. And let us know if you're interested in staying in touch with what we do by pinging me through the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. Our next speaker, I know you're probably all going to be quite familiar with, because she has created a movement that was rooted in Dunkeld and has now spread across Scotland, now across the world, like wildfire. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Jess Pepper from the Climate Cafés.
Thank you. And fascinating stuff about the bioregion. Really excited to hear that. Well, welcome to Birnam and Dunkeld, and to the home of the original Climate Café, which was established in 2015 in the run-up to the Paris negotiations. And I think there's various ways which the Climate Café fits with the themes which we're keen to explore today. I'll share with you the story of our Climate Café. And it is our story. It's a community collective story. There are lots of people who will have different stories about the Climate Café in this room, and many others outside this room as well who may like to contribute to what I can just start, hopefully. The purpose of a Climate Café is very simple. It's to create a space for people to be able to talk and then to take action if they choose on climate change. And it's a completely open, inclusive, non-judgmental, welcoming space, as you would have in any cafe. You can come informally and you can contribute, or you can sit back and listen and join in when you feel ready. In our village, and now more widely, we've encouraged that space to be a place where people can come and share their ideas, their leadership, whether you're a business or you're 6 years old, or you've got an idea or a big question or some news to share. If you're a community project already, this is not something which should compete, it's something which should allow you space to share what you're doing already. So it's a very collaborative space. And something which we found with the Climate Cafés is that not only are they collaborative, but we've really benefited from creativity within the cafes. That brings people together, it allows people to express themselves in different ways, it allows different kinds of conversations to get started. We now have 2 models really of the Climate Café, a regular monthly session, but also pop-up cafes which appear in the community. And you'll see from some of the photos that this is now extending beyond our immediate cafe in Dunkeld and Birnam. What we discovered in the early years was that people quite liked that space to come and talk, and within a year, folk had stopped me in the street because I was coordinating and asked if they could go onto the mailing list, and we had over 100 people on the mailing list. Now that's nearly 10% of our community, which is fairly significant as a shift. We thought we'd have a 6-month pilot, and here we are several years later with the cafe. What we discovered too was that other communities would come and join in and get involved in the conversation, but acknowledged that sometimes the conversation in a community can get hyper-local and then 10 minutes later be really global. But actually sharing these stories was really valuable. So what we discovered was that other people were keen to set up their own story, their own space and their own communities to have these conversations. And what we discovered, particularly through the pandemic, was that others were keen to connect. And of course, because we were all becoming accustomed to Zoom and virtual ways of connection, that became more possible. And so we discovered that in cafes across Scotland, people were joining from the east coast of the States, perhaps, and we extended that idea further. Some of these images you'll see are from COP26, where we chose to work with Climate Reality and an international organisation with leaders across communities, with the Climate Café as a tool to be able to extend that conversation and create space. It was really important at COP26 in Glasgow to create spaces for all voices to be heard. That was the 4th COP in the Global North, and those voices from the Global South, but also from women and younger people and other groups who may have otherwise been marginalised from that conversation. It was really important to amplify those voices and for those voices to be heard. So we had global climate cafes where we really just threw the doors open and anybody could join in a conversation very simply. The kit you need for a climate cafe is, in Scotland, a cup of tea, a kettle, and a plate of biscuits if they're lucky. But it might be culturally different in other parts of the world where people get together and talk. But connecting up around the world was really fascinating, and that the themes were connecting with each other as well, and people were able to share their own stories and make these connections. So we had somebody who would share photos of Alaskan volcanoes, whilst we had another guy who would join us from Benin, so that he felt involved in the conversation because he couldn't be in Glasgow despite his best efforts. So these conversations continue. And we'd invite you to join in with them too. We've looked at other ways of the cafes extending the conversation. This is in Glasgow Kelvin College, so there's a real movement coming from academia, from colleges and from universities. There's a real desire in Glasgow to link up a network of climate cafes across these institutions. And these are the catering students who this is not the usual spread for a climate cafe. But this international group of students who were remarkable in what they produced spoiled us at the launch of Glasgow Kelvin College Climate Cafes. This is a college that wants to lead in terms of skills and confidence in the just transition, and is really keen to work with Scottish Government on that. And this was the team behind the catering who then stayed on and held their own climate cafe. And the vision that they had and the solutions and the positive interaction was really fascinating. So, extending in all ways, and that's the start of our story. We now have, based in Dunkeld Birnam, in the co-working space, which we feel is really appropriate, a KIC, a community interest company, which is there only to support. Each cafe is unique and each has its own autonomy, but only to support and connect and offer a platform where people can connect with climate cafes, whether here in Scotland or around the world. So hopefully we can discuss further, and I'll pass on to others to continue the story. Thank you.
I'm still getting used to this setup here. I nearly got the headset one. I thought that's a bit too Britney for me. I think we'll just go a bit more low-key. Thank you so much, Jess. Absolutely fantastic. You can rope me in with a cup of tea and a biscuit anytime. Next up, we've got two Rubies, Ruby and Ruby, who are both young climate activists who have been very, very active over the past couple of years. And you might have noticed our gorgeous climate bunting, which they played no small part in helping the community here create. And they actually, I think, took that to Paris for COP21. I think they're going to tell us a bit more about that. But how fantastic to have two young climate activists, because young people have played such a massive, massive part in driving this move forward. So let's please give our warmest welcome of the night to Ruby and Ruby.
We're just going to talk to you a bit about today some projects that we've done together and separately, and just sort of take you through what young people like us are doing to be active today. So both of us have always been very passionate about the environment, and in 2015, when Ruby was 6 and I was 12, we decided we'd love to do a project together. So the project that we designed was the Bunting project. You can see the bunting strung up all around the room. The idea of the Bunting project was to get our local community really thinking about climate change and how it impacts us and what they can be doing to reduce the impact of it. So for the Bunting project, the idea was to use a hashtag for the love of, and then say something that you love and wouldn't want to lose to the devastating impacts of climate change. So if you look around the room, you'll see for the love of chocolates over here, for the love of my family. And it was just to really get people thinking about what they wouldn't want to lose and pull on people's heartstrings and get them to realise the serious impact of climate change. I think Ruby's going to tell you a bit about the journey our Bunting's been on.
So the Bunting obviously started in our local community, going around local beaver groups and local care homes. We just took it all around the community so that everybody had a chance. The youngest person who contributed was 2 years old and the oldest was 107. Some people did it, obviously people came who were from different countries on holiday and stuff, so they wrote it in their own language, which means it's got a wide variety of people's views. It went to the Paris Agreement in 2015, and then we redid it in 2021 for COP26, where it was to be hung in the green zone.
We also redid the Bunting project last year, for COP26. So this Bunting that's up just now is actually a mix of both years of the Bunting. So we've got 2015 and 2021. So it's very sentimental to us and shows a display of how people's views have changed and what's become more important to them or what they're thinking about it now. I think now we're both going to tell you just a bit about our projects that we've done separately and together. Just take you quickly through some bits that we've done in our community. So after the Bunting project, we got loads of youth engagement and a lot of young people were loving learning about climate change. So we actually set up a climate youth group at our local church group, and we did lots of stuff there. So we did a harvest supper where we used local produce from the field, and we created a supper with that. We also did a local bike outing, and we used the bikes from the group that already runs in Dunkeld to get people cycling instead of using the car. And we also did a swap shop and also an upcycled fashion show. So that project ran for a year, and it was loads of fun. Unfortunately, I've not got any pictures up. Sorry, that was me being unorganised and not sending it. But so we did lots of things like that. As well as that, we've both been involved in climate marches. We actually led together the Edinburgh Climate March ahead of Paris, and we've all been striking as well on Fridays. I was also lucky enough to be climate reality trained by Al Gore in 2018 in Berlin, so that was a great experience. And as well as that, in Berlin we learnt a lot about other countries and how climate change impacts them. So I was also lucky enough to go to Ghana for 2 months and see how they live there and how sustainably they live and learn about the problems there. And the next project that I'm hoping Ruby's going to help me with is a swap shop to educate people on fast fashion and the devastating impacts this is having, as Ghana currently has a huge problem with fast fashion and it has clothing dumps all across the country, especially in the capital. So that'll be our next project. So if you're local, look out for that because we'll be running a swap shop together. And I'll pass on to Ruby to tell you a bit about what she's been up to.
Well, me and Ruby, we've both spoken at a lot of events because we're trying to spread the word that we shouldn't just be quiet and scared about it, because even if you're nervous to speak about what you do, in case people don't agree with you, you should still mention your views because everyone should have an opinion. The biggest rally I've spoken at had 20,000 people in it, and it was held in Edinburgh. Me and my brother, and I think Ruby's been striking as well, we used to all go through the wind and rain and sit outside the Scottish Parliament we were the first people to ever strike outside the Scottish Parliament, and by the time that we spoke, there was 20,000. I also spoke at COI 16, when COP26 was on. That was Conference of the Youth. And at the event, there was people trying to silence us, and the Zoom meeting had to be shut down. But the participants got up and spoke anyway because we were not to be silenced. Me and my brother also spoke to the Clare committee, the Scottish Parliament Environment Committee, with other young people that were doing things for the environment around Scotland. And afterwards they had kind of like a meet and greet thing where we all talked about what we were doing and got everyone else on board on our ideas. Ruby and me, we started a thing called Cakes for Commuters. So when we were little, and my brother Diggy was involved in this as well, we used to go up to, well, we still do, we go up to the train station during the Climate Action Week that we hold in our local community, and we give anyone getting on the train a cake and a cup of tea to say thank you for taking public transport instead of driving. And this year we did it mainly on buses because obviously the trains aren't running as normal. And Ruby was on the Eco Committee when she was in secondary school, and now that I've joined secondary school, I'm on the Climate Café, and the S2s on the Climate Café are currently running a project called Snazzy Sneakers. So basically people give in their old shoes and we'll fix them up and sell them on for affordable prices so that we can afford to get more cleaning products and donate stuff to climate charities. And it means that people will be able to get more sustainable footwear, and they won't have to buy new shoes all the time. And that's just what we've done as two young people. There are millions more like us out there. So if we can make that impact, just imagine what everyone else can do if we just listen to them. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Yes, there we go. Wow! What an insane amount of fantastic things you've been doing, and so much more in the works. We must all look out for what you're getting up to next. Thank you both so much for speaking today. Next up, before we watch a quick video actually called The Awakening Story, we're going to hear from Jason Oliver, who's a heritage activist, which I think is a very, very cool title. I'm not quite sure what a heritage activist is, but I'm hoping we're going to find out a wee bit more. And Jason works at the Crannog Centre, so thinking about how the past might unlock lessons for us in the present. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Jason.
How do I follow that? Seriously? And that's the definition of activism, absolutely. So, hang on, let me go first. Is that working? Oh, yeah. So, my name is Jason, and I work at the Scottish Crannog Centre as an experimental archaeologist and heritage activist. We are the guardians of a collection that is 2,500 years old and was excavated from the site of a crannog, a dwelling over water which was inhabited by the people of the past during the Iron Age. We have 5,000 objects that give an insight into how people might have lived in a time before the concept of state and money existed. And so to us, in some ways, their community organisation would appear quite alien to us if we went back to the past. It appears as if they lived as egalitarian communities sharing skills, knowledge and objects both locally, nationally and internationally. We care for these objects in our museum, and they are a well of knowledge, a springboard for learning, and as a model for a different way of living, so crucial in this time of the climate crisis. As they were so different to us, we have to deal with uncertainty in the present about what the objects might be, but we can see marks on the objects that give an indication as to how they were used. You can see a couple of objects there. It's 2,500-year-old textile on the right, very, very small, 2 centimetres across, and we also have a stone on the left as well. So I'll leave it up to you to decide what they might be for. At the museum, we value the small and sometimes almost invisible traces on the objects. We may not truly know what the objects were for, but we can see the fingerprint of human interaction. Personally, I don't say things like, they were like this, or they did that. I talk about the small marks. Well, I talk about what the small marks can tell us about what people use, left behind and discarded. I try to keep it person-centred. This connection to the past builds up a story of what people made, how they understood each other, and the landscape they inhabited. Our interpretation is a form of storytelling where everybody who is connected to the museum, visitors, craftspeople, academics, our apprentices, people who drop in for coffee, volunteers, artists, sculptors, the architects, surveyors and cooperatives who are helping to plan and build our new museum, people who are struggling with mental and physical health, people who have been in prison, families, single moms, single dads, marginalised people, people whose society might forget, amongst many others, can have conversations that matter as part of our learning and understanding of the entanglement of people and places in the past and present. So this is kind of my work as an experimental archaeologist. So we'll take a textile fragment and we will get it analysed, and we'll work with academics who'll give us some basic data about what it might be, what it might look like, but it doesn't really tell us what people were doing or how it was made. So we have built a loom here, and then at the bottom we're working with Ashley Slater, who is a weaver from Blairgowrie, and we then made the textile at the end. We recreated it, even though we were told by 3 or 4 people that you wouldn't be able to recreate it. And then you go back to the collection, and so it goes round in a circle. So that's kind of basic perspective of what experimental archaeology is. So we work with uncertainty, and the most powerful statement at the moment is we don't know. When talking about our objects, saying this is this and that is that shuts down conversation and stops the toing and froing of information. We still have some way to go, but by asking the right questions and opening up conversation creates community bonds that stretch across time and place. These conversations seem to lack in other museums that I have visited or had interactions with, actually. Only the curator knows the answer, apparently, and information is presented in a way that shuts down conversations, and only people with academic knowledge can apparently contribute. This is this and that is that. Open-ended questions create dialogue where containers for learning can emerge and provide spaces for those who might not otherwise be heard. I've heard many conversations where people of the past seem to be struggling and not thriving, driven by their battle with the landscape and being defined by that struggle. But societies also change because of dissent. People going against the grain and thinking about things differently, and not just by how they interact with their inhabited landscapes. Such radical action by people of the past can inform our way of knowing in the present. At our museum, we have a diverse range of thinking. Young and older people, neurodivergent people, people living with intense personal challenges and those people helping each other. We have a young volunteer with Down syndrome working with us twice a week, supported and mentored by another volunteer who lives with autism. In any other environment, these would be checkbox diversity opportunities. But in our museum, this is an ordinary day. We try to make the extraordinary into the ordinary, where the random becomes commonplace. Moving into the future as part of the never-ending story our collection invokes, we are moving to a new museum site with buildings that are not meant to last, inspired and informed by the past and how people lived. When they fall down, they will be dug back into the landscape from which they came from to create spaces where we can grow crops. All of our resources will be sourced from within walking distance. We aim to be the greenest museum in Scotland with climate action at its heart. So work on the site will be dictated by the seasons. The site will be community-led and community-built with a vision of collaboration and trust at its heart. We have a collective called the Crosscut Collective. It's a women's collective who will actually be building the roundhouses. Our collection will continue to ask whispered questions which we will answer with collective action in the form of making, understanding and storytelling, which connects us directly back to the Crannog dwellers of 2,500 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Has everybody here been to visit the Crannog Centre? Hands up if you've been. Oh, cool. Quite a few people haven't been. Come on then, got to get yourselves up there for a visit. I went a couple of years ago now and had a fabulous time churning my own butter. So I can really, really appreciate that interactive element of what you do is so, so important to engage us with the material world. Thank you, Jason. Next we are going to watch a quick short video that was actually commissioned for COP26 by the Cataran Eco Museum, another fantastic project that you must check out. So we're going to watch this, and this is called The Awakening.
The 6th of November 2021 was the designated Day of Action against climate change. In Glasgow, tens of thousands of people took to the streets. Meanwhile, here in the hills of Glenshee, the community gathered for their cultural response to COP26. It's centred around a multimedia arts installation. The Giant's Hand, a huge artwork clutching the hills of Corrie Lairg. A new story and a new poem had been commissioned and were performed for the first time that day.
It's trying to have events taking place within the landscape, looking at historical information that can help us to transition towards a low carbon future, but also just trying to support people to connect and reconnect with that landscape and its past.
So we're here, high above the Spittal of Glenshee, commissioned by Cataran Eco Museum to create a giant hand made from jute and geotextiles. We're working from a viewpoint from about a mile away. We're controlling the image. We're about 650 metres above sea level, which has its own challenges, weather being one of them. Walked around the Spittal of Glenshee a lot in various locations to try and pinpoint the best spot, and this one, this one came out on top. For the geographical setting, kind of natural amphitheatre of the quarry. Lovely clouds come in, partially obscure it. Gives it this beautiful kind of mysterious value. From the top of the hill to the tip of the finger, it's about 175 metres in length, about 50 metres wide. The full area is about 9,000 square metres. Yeah, it's a big piece. You can see it from very far away. It's taken about a month to install, and it'll be on the ground for about 6 weeks.
This area is rich in song and story and poem and folklore. No more so than connections to Finn McCool, the mighty, legendary Celtic warrior. And it is said that he and his band of warriors, the Fina, lie sleeping deep underground, waiting to be woken in time of emergency. Well, the climate emergency is upon us.
I think the weather actually added to the atmosphere today. The mist came over, we couldn't see the hand, then the event started with the Storyteller.
And they told how they were scared. They were scared that the spirit of the earth, Gaia, was not just sick, but dying. Well, who's doing something about this, said Ben and Donna.
What about Finn? Why isn't anyone woken him up? It'll take someone very special to wake him up. It must be somebody very brave and very strong, and somebody with greater voice. That's me, said Ben and Donna. Yes, said the Spirit of the Land.
When Finn was a young man, he tasted the salmon of knowledge. And the salmon of knowledge gained its wisdom from the nuts from the hazel trees. And so, hazel trees, 8 hazel trees, were gifted by primary school pupils to each of the communities around Glen Shee. So their wisdom and knowledge were shared and would grow alongside the young trees.
So he reached out his right hand and grabbed the hill in front of him. And with the last of his strength, he pulled his head up over the hill. And with his dying breath, he roared Finn's name. And that roar rushed down the glen, and it echoed around the hills until it went deep into the bones of the land, where it rumbled. In a deep cave, far, far underground, lie 12 great men sleeping, 11 in a circle with one in the middle. And beside the one in the middle is a mighty war horn. And as Ben and Donna's roar reached the cave and echoed its way round and round and round, the mighty Duerfina, to be called to wake Finn in time of emergency, begins to sound.
Here in Glen Shee, I warn of a burning of your winters. My name is Destiny. I'm everything. I'm everywhere. I'm the sum of your misadventures, your unchecked greed, your blindfolded advance down roads built from others' pain. I was once a landscape of endless opportunity, and now I'm dying in the choke. Here in Glen Shee, I warn of blizzards in your summers, yet still you allow clouds of empty promise to darken your thoughts, to confuse your decisions. I reach out on your calling to shape these words into truths. I breathe air into their lungs. I am a purpose of time. My truths are for your children, but their future is your blame. Ignore me, and I will help dig the graves. And in the deep quarries around me, the echo of noble stags will become the haunted lament of loss. But if you accept my name as Destiny, in this precious world, your home, this earth, your sustenance, this water, your blood, I will arm your children with sharper words. I will clothe them in determination. Today, I am your crossroads. Let tomorrow be your awakening.
For the day after that
is your funeral.
Thank you. Now you can all go home.
Project. Every time I see that video, it really, really moves me. I don't know about anyone else in the room, but wow, what a feat as well to build that giant hand. I cannot even imagine what that must have taken up there in the hills and the weather, and I think that rain and dreich day just really adds to the vibe, doesn't it, of the whole thing. You might have actually noticed, or maybe you haven't, but we actually have Lindsay Gibb, the storyteller in the video, here with us tonight, which is fantastic. Lindsay is going to tell us a bit more about her work, and I think she's going to get you all involved as well, so keep you on your toes. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Lindsay.
I definitely don't need to introduce myself after that. God, that brought back some memories. It took me 2 days to dry out. It really was as wet as you thought it was. So I'm a storyteller, I'm a professional storyteller, performance storyteller, traditional storyteller, a narrative artist, whatever you want to call us. I get to tell stories, and frankly, Graham, isn't it the best job in the world? I do lots of work with storytelling around climate change. It's something I've been involved with for as long as I can remember. And as a result, people come and ask me to do lots of storytelling around climate change. But being a storyteller, I could talk to you about it, but I'd much rather do it. So one of the things I do is called Stories in Science, and I work with scientist Joel Brand. And what we do is we go to somewhere. Jess, you talked about tea and cake, as we know, a very important part of Scotland's history and culture. So's the pub. So that's where we go. And I will tell stories, and Joel leads a discussion where we can chat about the stories in a bit more detail. And as a storyteller, that's heaven, because I'm getting to talk to people about stories the whole time. So I thought we would do a wee Stories in Science just here, just now. So I'm going to tell you a wee short story, because I've not got much time. So it's going to be a wee one. And then I'm going to come out to you guys, and just what did the story mean to you? Okay, what did you think? What did you take from it? There's no wrong answers. That's the beauty of this. There's no wrong answers, because everybody is going to have their own take on it. So I'll give you a few seconds after I finish telling the story just to kind of get your heads together and see what comes to mind. So this is a Mullah Nasruddin story, and these are told all throughout Asia. This particular story we think comes from Turkey. And for those of you not familiar with Nasruddin, in some stories he's the wise man, and in others he's the fool. You can decide for yourselves on this story. So Nasruddin, one day, he picks up his spade and he heads off to a piece of ground that he has. It's dry and dusty, but every day he's digging it over and working the ground. And his neighbours and his friends see him do this, but they didn't really think anything of it. It was Nasruddin after all. You could never be sure what he was up to next. And after he'd finished digging the ground, well, then he hoed it and tilled it until it was beautiful soil. And then he started piling it up in long rows. And his friends and his neighbours looked on curiously. And then Nasruddin began to plant trees. But these weren't any trees. These were fruit trees. And when they saw this, Nasruddin's friends and his neighbours, they started to laugh at him. Nasruddin, what are you doing? You are so stupid. See those trees? By the time they are grown and giving fruit, well, you'll be dead. You'll never get to see any of the fruit from those trees. You're such a dafty. Honestly, Nasruddin, what are you thinking? And day after day, Nasruddin would go back and plant these trees. And day after day, his neighbours and his friends would laugh at him and go, what are you doing? How stupid are you? You're never going to see the fruits of these trees. Until the day came when he put his final spade of earth down and the last tree was planted. And he looked up at his friends and his neighbours and he simply said, I'm planting for the next generation. That's my phone. Give me a second. I thought I'd switch the alarm off. So that's brilliant, because it's given you all a few seconds to have a wee think about what you thought of that story. But before I come out to you, I'm also going to talk about one of those weird coincidences that happen. I've literally walked in the door from another gig where I was working at the Japanese garden at Cowden, for those of you who know it, and they have a strapline. To create a garden is to believe in tomorrow.
And I thought, doesn't that fit with the Nasruddin story? So I had to buy the fridge magnet. So, has anyone any thoughts about that story on Nasruddin? Anything that particularly came to mind? Come on, don't be shy. This only works if you join in as well. I can talk all day, but it'd be nice to hear from you. Hello, yes, what's you thinking? Yeah. So I'm going to repeat these just so the live stream can hear me. So the first one is one, you've got to do the work. Yep.
And the second is you have to get out of short-term thinking and do the long-term.
Yeah. So the second one is getting out the short-term thinking and into the long-term. Isn't that story just a great exemplar of that? Yeah.
It helps if you own the land.
Yes. Or at least are able to employ it. Yes, you're absolutely right on that. Yeah.
I was thinking about water because I thought the story was going to say where is it going to get the water, and I was listening to a story about a Ursk. Is that how you say it?
Ursk.
The other day about how a good Ursk provided some water for the farmer who had a dry patch, and water is the key to life.
It absolutely is. You're talking about the story that gives Aberfeldy its name. So, cracking story, and I can happily tell you but at another time. So, yeah, so it's a brilliant story. It's about how Aberfeldy gets its name. It's absolutely crack on using Ursks in Scotland, which are very attracted to water. But yeah, exactly. You think it's maybe going to go one way, and I could easily weave that story into water, but I've only got 7 minutes, so they're going to flag me down in a minute and tell me to be wheeshed. So, anyone else got any thoughts? Oh, hey, Ruby, over there. So I'm just going to repeat that for the live stream. Ruby, you were saying they were kind of thinking about themselves rather than anyone in the future, and also the fact that the trees in the future will start soaking up the carbon dioxide. Have I got that okay? Yeah, so a couple of things in there. Again, look into the future. Hello.
What it means to be the first to do something when others are laughing or opposing.
Oh yes, what it means, again, I'll just repeat this. Being the first when everyone else jeers at you or ridicules you. How many of us who've been involved in this for a very, very long time have been in that situation? Absolutely. Yeah, oh gosh, goodness, that got a response. I've got lots of people going, yeah. So yes, that's great. So that's the wonderful thing about stories and storytelling, is everyone in this room will take different things from the stories, and you'll all go away with your own perception of what that story was about, of what it might mean for you. And that causes its own ripples. As a storyteller, it's no for me to tell you what to make of that story. It's for everybody to make of it of their own and take it on, and feel free to go and tell it yourselves as well. One thing I would say, just on a wee bit of storytelling etiquette, if you're telling from another culture, do your research first. But I'll put that to the side. The other thing is it creates a safe space. So I talked about how we took this to the pub. Does it get much safer? And Joel and me, the event was set up, and I had a number of stories I was going to tell, and Joel knew what he wanted to, how he wanted to start the discussions going. And when we arrived, there was a couple of guys sitting at the table, and we thought, great, people have planned ahead for the event, this is fantastic. And then everyone else turns up, and the event gets going, and the two guys in the corner look a little bit startled. They'd just been in for a quiet pint, and we turned up and did the event around them. But rather than getting up and leaving or being disgruntled about the event, they listened to the stories and they joined in the debate. And at the end, they came up and had a long chat with me about climate change and what we need to do about it. So it can reach people that you might not otherwise reach. And it can create that safe space. It's another form of a safe space where you can chat and talk about things that can be a little bit difficult, because you're talking about the characters and the place and the actions in the story. You're not talking about anyone or anything particular. And it's fantastic for that. I do a lot of other work around climate change. You talked earlier about working with gamekeepers. I'm at the Game Fair in a couple of weeks doing exactly this, stories and science. So I don't know how much people are going to be chatting to me and how much they're going to be looking at tractors and other exciting things, but I'm hoping people will come and talk to me. But earlier this year as well, I ran a CPD event for storytellers on looking at the role of storytelling and climate change and young people, particularly around climate despair. And I worked with one of the young Scottish storytellers. And I'm going to leave you with what she said to me, because I think it sums it up beautifully. Stories cannot solve climate change, but they can make people think differently. And I don't think you can say it better than that. So that's Ailsa Dixon who said that. So thank you very much. We'll be around if anyone wants to chat, or if you've got any more ideas in the Nasruddin story. I'm always up for a blather when it relates to stories.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you very much. So before we're going to go and grab some food and some drinks, we've got one more speaker who's also a storyteller, which is great. So I'm going to invite Alex Turner to come up and tell her story, which is called The Story Scraper. And this is a speculative piece of fiction based in future Dunkeld. And Alex is actually one of our micro-commissions. So the Tayside Beacons had 3 micro-commissions for artists to go out and work with the community. And Alex, I think, has been in conversation with the Climate Cafés a little bit. So Alex, it's great to have you. Let's all give Alex a warm welcome, folks.
It's 2055. I'm a storyscaper here in Dunkeld. I've spent the last 33 years carving our stories into and out of the landscape. I'm not from around here. I'd only just started to put down my roots when the rains came and washed everything away. We lost everything. But in truth, the things that mattered the most, we lost a long time before that. We learned the hard way. Our stuff, our things, they don't matter. Our wealth, our value, it lies in our communities. It's stored in our stories. My job was to find them and put them back. We didn't really know what we were doing when we started the Storyscaper project. But as we went on, the patterns began to emerge. We found them in the old maps. Ancient drovers' paths, mountain biking routes, dual carriageways, railway lines. They're all buried under the mud now. But as we started to stitch our stories back together, we started to see the patterns. These stories, they were weaving communities together in these fabrics, weaving our communities together through time and space. If you go out today, if you put on your AR headsets, out into the lands where the great laird's larches used to be, you'll see them. Hundreds of stories, just stretched through the landscape, like prayer flags or bunting. There are stories, there are memories draped over the landscape, prayers to the future and for the past. Through this storyscaping project, we asked our local community to share our stories, to share their stories with us. And tonight, here, I'm going to share 3 of my favourites from our passive perspective, from our Storyscape project. The first is from Craig. He was 6 when he wrote this. Mummy says I'm lucky. She says that when she was little, she had to do homework every day. Instead, all I have to do is home walks. After school, we meet up with our friends and family for walks together. We eat donuts and we talk and walk. Everyone gets to speak. I like it best when everyone laughs, but it's also nice that the adults listen to me. They make me feel important. Mummy says it always wasn't like that. She says it used to rain a lot, and in the olden days, people sat up to their necks in water watching Netflix, not talking to each other. I'm scared of being Netflicked, but Mummy says donuts and home walks will keep me safe, and I like Dunkeld because it's safe and nice. Sophie, she's one of our teachers, she's 37. I don't know if I have a right to record my memories here because I didn't grow up in Dunkeld. I'm a teacher and I was very new to the area when everything got washed away. But the special thing about Dunkeld, for me, is the people. It took time to rebuild the town. We had to reimagine it first. One of the elders took us to see these sprawling tractor cemeteries. All this machinery was just buried in the mud. It became a monument to the olden times. But it became a place to spark ideas. For a while, we actually called it the spark plug, because that's what those old big machines used to have. For a while, we actually called it that, until the spark went out, of course. But then we came together, using our land in more nourishing ways. We created a circular solidarity economy. That's what the Dunkeld Donut Festival celebrates, and I look forward to it every year. Mary, aged 80. I grew up in Dunkeld. I come from a family of farmers. Well, that's what we did before. My parents didn't live to see the rains. They'd passed long before that, back in the days of farms the size of whole countries. They took their knowledge with them when they went. I'm ashamed to say I was glad to see it go. I wanted a modern job when I was a lass. I thought my parents were stubborn, stick in the mud, stuck in the past types. We ignored their warnings, but look what happened. It turned out it was us that got stuck in the mud. Nothing could get us out. Emergency relief, bailout funds, the politicians came and gandered. They kept giving us more money. Everything we bought would get buried again. But then, one season, things changed. We had this light bulb moment, if you can remember what a light bulb is. We used to say that about good ideas back in my day. Anyway, after that, things began to thrive. We founded a local granary that grew into a food co-op. We started making donuts. It worked because we worked together. Shared, hand-me-down stories. We got stronger the more we listened and the more we shared. Even the kids got involved, and we realised that's who we're doing this for. We made it the first principle in our donut charter, the 3-generation rule. And that gives me hope. Our charter is our beacon. We used to say, switch the lights off when you're done. We were so worried about saving power back then. But our power comes from our collective now, and that gives me hope too. May that keep the beacon on for future generations to come. Now, I'm sorry to say, Mary sadly passed away 10 years ago. She's no longer with us. She left behind a stash of old light bulbs. And when we rebuilt Dunkeld, we lit up our community with our stories. That's where our power came from. They help us survive. They help us thrive. We stopped excavating our tractors all those years ago. And everything got better when we started excavating our stories. Thanks very much for listening to my story, The Story Speaker. And we want to throw it back to you a little bit. So on your tables, you'll find some little bits of paper. They're actually offcuts from the Artist in Residence project. She has an exhibition on at the moment. So there's little bits of paper and some pencils. And we invite you to share your memories and share your hopes for the future, whether it's 33 years in the future. Sorry, we're back in 2022 now. Or 100 years. And you can keep these little, your visions for the future. And we'd also love you, though, if you want, it's an invitation to share them with each other or share them with a stranger, but to pass on that vision for future Dunkeld. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, you've made it through. It's time for a wee bit of champers. And I think there's a wee bit of stovies. Oh, and there was something else, but I can't remember what it was. Stovies and something else. It's going to be a surprise. Oh, dal. That was it. Anna told me earlier. Stovies and dal. What a night. So we're going to come back at about 25 past, please. Anyone who's joining us on the live stream, I'm afraid there's no dal. We can't beam it to you. But we'll be really glad to see everyone back at 25 past. All right? Thank you so much, folks. Oh, and I've just, forgot to say, have a little think while you're eating of some questions you might like to ask our panel, because we're going to have a big panel discussion after our food. All right? Thank you.
That I've learned to let you love me, it's better than before. that you love me, it's better than before. Now that you've learned to let me love you, don't let me down. Now that I've learned to let you love me, it's better than before. Now that you've learned to let me love you, don't let me down. We'll gather round you. 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 Crianças que ela reserven als na spade nos verkien. Sie hat de seiltje gegrenje, ze show de glenkes harte. Ongortig u så det skliaf, ni fem ganjansende. Big doch alles regar nanam, stil heen janig ser shin. Oh hello, oh hello, oh ene colore, oh hello. A mi fai que llegadi, gerne gå nevas mechem, så det synge gachnem fai, svata mishem avayet laun, sheriri yun sit the holders, glorious on it harsh gachim, tenere ein kriansen var, skiabo chanam avayet lein. Oh hello, oh hello, oh ene colore, oh hello, and now todo va again. Lekker met charkloederilai, kiari mahenish katlu, snarai shin vohusen la, karemech kurishindu, malek shin yartes and yape. She's a lightning in the dark, oh, the brightest morning star. She's a fighter and a lover, oh, the captive and the hunter. She's a walking disaster, she's the tears and the laughter. Oh, you know I wouldn't change her. Oh, you know I wouldn't change her. And I would search high and low to find the one that heals me. And when I see her standing there, oh, she moves me. She's a fire within me, and the air that chills me. She's wired and waiting. She moves me. Oh, she moves me. She's together and she's broken. She's been sung and gone unspoken. Oh, I feel it when I hold her. Oh, I feel it when I hold her. She's the downpour and the harbor. She's the wretch and she's the putter. Oh, she's worn and still unweathered. Oh, you know I wouldn't change her. And I would search high and low to find the one that heals me. And when I see her standing there, oh, she moves me. She's the fire within me, and the air that chills me. She's wired and waiting. She moves me. She's the fire within me, and the air that chills me. She's wired and waiting. She moves me. Oh, she moves me. Oh, she moves me. mention how heriero oro ya the hero like show the mahu heriero oro ya the hero like show the mahu heriero oro ya the hero the valley ya the heriero oro ya the hero the valley ya the heriero oro ya the hero you valley the heriero oro ya the hero
Hello, 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 hello. That's it. Okay, folks, I'm very sorry to rush you with your dinner and our speakers, who I think were wolfing down as much as they could, but probably only got to eat half. Sorry about that, folks. So we've got the chance now to ask some questions. So I hope you've all got lots of great questions in your head to ask some of our speakers. And anyone who's joining us on the live stream, please ask your questions there as well. And we've got someone who's going to pick them up for us. Thank you. So does anybody want to kick us off with the first question? Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
So when I was thinking about the reflection I had to your story, Lindsay, and about what it means to be the first one or a first group to strike out, I was thinking about the Rubies and the sort of striking out that you did, and also that the moment you described where one of the groups that you were at and one of the cops was people tried to silence you. So I'd love to hear reflections about striking out and being the first, or being in a group of firsts, and what that feels like, and ways in which we can try and inspire people to not be afraid of that moment.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Do we have any reflections on that? Yes, I think there's a wee mic there that's going to pick you up, Ruby.
So, since I'm like a kid who goes to school and stuff, I've got a wide variety of friends. So when I speak to some of them come to the school Climate Café and help out because they know it's the right thing to do, or they're just bored one lunchtime and then they learn it's the right thing to do. But there is some kids who I'm friends with who just drop their litter and say, oh, I don't care about the environment, it's all fine and someone else will sort it. But if everyone says that someone else will sort it, then who is going to be that someone else? You need to clear up. If you clear up after yourself, then it's less work for everyone else. And if everyone clears up after themselves, then it means that we wouldn't be stuck in this mess.
Great answer, thank you. Any other reflections, maybe from the other Ruby? What does it feel like being part of all that, and when you're on your climate strike and in the streets kind of chanting? Yeah.
I think that the groups like the Climate Cafés that Jess was talking about is a great way to not feel singled out. So at the beginning I found that when I was in school I was the first to sort of get in touch with Jess and have an interest in it. But now I think that it's very different and there's quite a lot of spaces, like social media is a big one as well, that people can either speak out if they can't do it in person quite yet, they can do it behind the screen and build up to doing it in person. So I think that there is loads of groups and things that have made it a lot easier to speak out. So finding one of those would be a great way to encourage someone to get involved and to advise them of someone or someone online or someone to email. So you don't feel so singled out. When you find a group of people who have the same interests and the same opinion, you don't feel so alone. And that's a great thing about Climate Café as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, so my question is really for Clare, though others might have a view also. In 2042, what will be on my plate?
It was I was saying to Andrew just a few minutes ago that actually it was quite a contentious day because there were a very diverse group of people. Can you hear me okay? Very diverse group of people. And quite a lot of small growers and people who were running community growing opportunities of various kinds. So I think what was particularly interesting was the response to the more commercial farmer and this product that they're developing, which is a kind of, well, it's a new mashed potato with no additives, but it is actually vacuum packed and therefore has a very long shelf life, and you can also use very little heat, microwave to heat it up. But it was so far on the other end of the spectrum from the small growers and the community growers that created a really interesting discussion throughout the day. A very respectful discussion, I have to say, but a very contentious one. And actually it was David B, who you probably all know, who was with us, and we were very grateful for him coming all the way over, who actually said that we need both. We need both the people who can work at scale in these ways that lots of us might find quite problematic, but you also needed the small people too. So in answer to your question, we didn't come up with a fundamental answer. I think what we started to understand is that we need to look at the system. We all need to see the system of food that we're kind of engaging with every day and try and push it working together in various different ways towards having a better answer to that. But you know, the usual stuff about having less meat and being more plant-based and more local food supply chains and how we actually built all of that up was very much part of the conversation. But come and help us work out what the answer to that is.
Thanks, Claire. Any other questions? Brilliant, thank you.
I guess I have a question for everyone, really. And we've talked a bit about community. And here, you're talking to a group of very like-minded individuals. Everybody here kind of believes in your cause. And it's like that Facebook, the confirmation bias, right? That you see people, you like things that like the same things. I guess my question is, how can you reach a wider community, people who aren't necessarily interested, the ones dropping the litter in your example, Ruby? How are you going to reach those people? What plans do you have?
Open to anyone up there. Jess?
Yeah. Shall I say a bit about? I'll say a bit about Climate Café and how that's how our learning in this community really about that. As I said, the purpose of the Climate Café is to create that space so that anybody can participate in that conversation and engage in it. And what we probably as a community have learned is that actually across the community, when we started in 2015, people didn't naturally have conversations about climate change at the bus stop or in the co-op or in the park. That wasn't part of the feature of our chats. It was quite difficult sometimes to broach that conversation. And now, you won't find that in this community. You'll find that actually you can definitely have a conversation about climate change, and a lot of people are, in schools and cafes and at the bus stop. And people have engaged in their own way, and that's been really fascinating. One of the outcomes has been, what's really interesting, and this is not just here, but in other places, is that once the conversation gets started and you think, oh, come on, the scale of the challenge, the pace we need to be acting at, we're talking about having a cup of tea, really? But actually what we've seen happening is that once people get together and they feel able to talk and other people are able to join that conversation, and the Bunting is able, for example, here to prompt more conversations and wider conversations, intergenerational conversations, across different interest conversations, then actually what you start to see is people coming together and acting on things which matter to them. Local people know their place best, know what will work and what the issues are and what their needs are. And you see people coming together and moving, and not just moving, but moving at scale and moving at pace and doing remarkable things. I mean, there's lots of stories shared on the Climate Café website at climate.cafe, and you see, people really moving. One of the outcomes from our Climate Café here has been Dunkeld Birnam Unplugged, where we bring together the creativity. So our local area is known for its live music, and we've taken the Climate Café conversations to the pub, and this is where the stories and science happens, but also other workshops and conversations. It's a completely different part of the community who were involved in events last year, in our first sort of comeback since lockdown, and that's extending the conversation. So I think the really important thing is that it's not about people who think about climate. This is about cost of living, this is about food, this is about what we choose to eat, what we wear, and all of these things, and everybody has an in that's what we sometimes call tabletop conversation stuff, whatever is relevant to people in their own. And the more we can extend that conversation and make it open to everybody and not exclusive to those who feel they know best or have a solution, it's about all of us, and that's the benefit, is getting all those different perspectives and insights into what the solutions may be in a community.
Just going to add to that, just picking up on Jess's point, go to places where they're going to be and use language that is accessible to everybody. I sat through something on Wednesday for 2 hours. I have no idea what they talked about for the first hour. I've been doing climate change a very long time. I still don't know what they're talking about. So you're absolutely right. Conscious bias and preaching to the converted can be an issue. So take it elsewhere. Go to the different places. Use it in different ways. Do different things. But also the people that you work with can be really important. Joel, who can't be here, who's the science part of Stories, he's worked in most of the bars in Dunkeld while he works his way through uni, and so he's really well known. So everyone, we went to the pub, I was like, oh, it's Joel, oh, he'll be doing something interesting. So we got a whole different audience because they knew him differently. So that can be really important as too, is just sort of thinking how you do that as well, as placing people.
Brilliant. Anybody else want to come in there? Jason?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we think about radical action and climate change, this conversation first started in about 1930, 1940, and then it took off in the late 60s. And people who were involved in thinking about climate change, talking about climate change, were seen as kind of their further dropouts. And the whole language around that was, it was revolutionary. We're using the same conversation now, we're saying the same thing, but now it's become a class issue. So, for example, if you go to a shop that is selling upcycled clothing, or if you go to a health shop and you are buying soybeans, whatever you're doing, and you're eating food, all of these things are positioned in a very middle class context, and the language has become really, really middle class. And I think it's about, when people say they're not included in the conversation, they don't care about it. People do care about it. I think that's an assumption, because people care about their own lives and they care about what they can afford, and they care about what they can eat and what they can put on the table. And that's a kind of basic need, isn't it? It's food and warmth. And if people do not have the money beyond that to feel like they've got access into the conversations that we're having now, it is a class issue, I think. It really, really is. And I think it's about changing the language. And it is about going to other places. It's about going to council estates. It's to look at why poverty happens. And it's looking at why we as people, as activists, cannot access those spaces. Why not? But as I said, I do think it's a working class issue. I think it's also down to green capitalism. I think a lot of the issues that we're talking about now have become capitalised on. It's a way of making money. Greenwashing is a massive problem. So it has to go back to class. It's definitely a class issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's really important to connect. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is that there's barriers to connecting. And I think that's why I love stories, and I love taking climate out of climate and putting it in a different space like arts or just anywhere where the people are at. And I think that being able to connect, it takes a kind of vulnerability, and I think we're like navigating that space, and that gives me hope, because when we aren't vulnerable, we can't connect, and that creates problems just across the board and lots of different kind of topics as well. So I think connecting is really vital, and being able to connect, and I think I'm really grateful for this opportunity, for this space to be able to do that. I think the arts is a really interesting place to do that.
Definitely.
Yes. Well, we need to not force people into acting on climate change, because when I was really little, obviously I didn't know anything about climate change, and through my family discussing it and bringing it up more with me and explaining it to me, not in a forceful way, not telling me to do things, it's meant that I've been brought up in a way which means that I know what's important and I know that I can act on climate change, whereas some people might feel nervous to act on climate change because they've not been told how to, they've not been taught to speak up for themselves, and the reason they're saying no, I don't care, is not because they don't care, it's because they're scared to care, because when they start caring, and then that means they're going to feel pressurized to do big things, when even if you just start small, you can go big if you want to, or you can stay small and try and work up to going big. You don't have to go big immediately.
Such a good point. Thank you, Ruby. Yeah. I've got another question over here. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, recently said there is right now $150 trillion available to go into nature restoration. Scotland and Wales are both at the sharp edge of a process which is going to be a juggernaut on the scale that led to the clearances. On that scale, the scale of the money about to come in. This project I mentioned earlier, we've got 3 years to try and persuade the Scottish Government to show them how to act on their stated commitment to empower local people within decision making, which means getting them to relinquish their hold over that decision making. I've got 300,000 to spend on a process of research and arts activities led by an arts organisation called Northern Heartlands. We're going to be based in Angus and Perthshire, and building a partnership around that which will observe how we go about building trust, how we get evidence from people that is pertinent, how we show how these traditional practices are full of pertinent knowledge, nous, wit and wisdom that are relevant to responding to the crisis that we face, and actually doing something with this money that is about to descend in tsunami lows into the uplands that could, if it's not managed properly. So, could I ask each of the panellists, if you were given 300,000 to spend over the next 3 years to facilitate more locally empowered decision making about these, how would you do it? And can I just, before handing over, suggest that the Irish have already found the way through a thing called locally led governance.
Mm-hmm.
that was pioneered in the Burren, where farmers and an ecologist went to the ministry and said, rather than you design an agri-environment scheme, tell us what it is you want from it and we'll design it and deliver it. And it's been a massive success, and this is starting to take root across Ireland, and it needs to take root in Scotland. Thank you.
So just to, did we all get the question there? If you had, how much was it?
300,000.
A big 300,000.
I'm very happy to have a go
Oh, please, Clare.
contributing a tiny piece of the possible jigsaw puzzle in that. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also involved in the Crannog Museum as well as Bioregioning Tayside, and they broadly have the same DNA in that they are place-based, community-led, and all about regeneration. And as a result of another COP26 project that we did last year with an environmental scientist called Dr. Richard Tipping, which was essentially a massive 20,000-year timeline of climate change in this part of Scotland, which was mounted on a fence actually in the middle of Ailith. We started to talk about what other work we could do in what is called paleoecology. And Richard and myself and others have come up with a series of projects which, if we can raise £50,000, I'd be happy, which is all about looking at the way land use has been changed by humans since the Industrial Revolution, particularly in the Crannog Museum area, obviously, but looking at the way drainage patterns have emerged, about how river courses have been changed, about how peat has been taken out and what that has done not only to the ecology but to how the water is held by the land. And you suddenly start to realise that what we've been doing since the Industrial Revolution is actually contributing to how these extreme weather events are sort of coming upon us now. And this is a very little understood area. I mean, I think the paleoecologists understand it, but there's not very many people who are trying to make it relevant to what we're experiencing now, and that's what we want to do. So I think this kind of looking at the past to see how we can learn to manage the future is a very underrepresented bit of that jigsaw puzzle, and we're hoping to do that, and I'd be very happy to share the information about that if you're interested.
Thank you, Clare. Anyone else?
I mean, this isn't my wheelhouse. Very definitely not a politician. But I think maybe this is something you're alluding to there, is about citizens' assemblies. They've been really successful in, maybe it's an Irish model in Wales and in Japan. But I think incentivising people, local people, normal people with normal jobs doing normal things, into decision making and into a year-long process of decision making. And I think I would use that money to make those roles paid as a model. And I think the Japanese model with their kind of intergenerational 7 generations, they like to bring children into that. So I think that's really important. But I think the citizens' assembly model is really interesting, and I think the reason it maybe doesn't naturally spark kind of our imagination is because we've got used to the way our political system works, where if you ask someone to get involved in decision making, they give silly answers because we just don't think we're going to get taken seriously. The government doesn't take us seriously. We've just kind of got used to that. Whereas I think the Citizens' Assembly flips that. And I think we have to really start to trust that and demand it as well. So it has to kind of be both sides. I think the British system is very famous for the government doesn't trust the people and people don't trust the government. And we really have to fix that in order to push it. So I would go down some paid positions, I think, with that money.
Thank you. During the first lockdown, myself and another group of activists actually set up the Dundee People's Assembly. We had 2 different processes. So one was citywide, asking about what should a green recovery look like for our city, and the second one was in each ward. And that was focusing on what's next for our community after COVID. And if you're tuned in, you'll know that the Scottish Government just recently had their first Citizens' Assembly on the climate, and there was a whole bunch of proposals that came out of that, which are really worthwhile looking at. And I think the Scottish Communities Climate Action Network in a couple of weeks' time have got an online session about how to facilitate deliberative processes. So if anyone's interested, you can definitely check that out. I'm a big, big fan of the People's Assembly model. And we've got a question online, which is exciting. Do you want to read the question?
Can I just respond to this one as well?
Oh, sorry, Lindsay, of course.
The big thing I would say is let's not reinvent the wheelie. We've got loads of work. Look at what we've talked about today, and that's just a small portion of it. Let's support what we're already doing. Let's learn from what we've already done, and let's build on that. There is nothing, you know, you can easily waste 300 grand on doing something that's already been done. Let's learn the lessons of what's been going on before. So that's what I'd be looking to do. Might not spend you your money, but let's look at that the way forward.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah, I complement that with, you know, we have a lot of learning already. I think my instinct would be to enable communities to host their own conversations. And actually, something similar happened a few years ago with the big climate conversation that Scottish Government initiated, to their credit. The disappointing part for me is that they didn't really, well, they may have listened at the time, but you haven't really seen the outcomes of that. And so if we have these participative conversations and transparency about those, about the process of what happens with those, and a bit of accountability about what comes out of them, that would all be really valuable. So if it's 50 quid for tea and biscuits across the country, going to, you know, some palm oil-free local producers, whatever, then that may be an investment in the local economy. And the key thing is to listen. I mean, to its credit, the Scottish Climate Assembly put children at the heart of the process as well, as we've done with initiative here in our community. And it's a bit of a culture shifter. People do feel out of their comfort zone putting children at the heart of the process and having to tune in and really listen to what the children are saying. But my goodness, I have heard, I can't tell you how many doubters on these kinds of processes at the beginning, but to come towards the middle of it, people start to listen and start to tune in and start to be amazed and moved and informed by what children are saying, because children will speak with clarity about what is actually happening and call, you know, speak truth to power as well. So those uncomfortable things which we might be able to, as adults, we might be conditioned to say, well, it's okay if we do this now because, you know, maybe we'll change then. That's not what we tend to hear from children. Children often are creative and solutions focused, and well, you can hear that. I've learned so much from that. But there's something about the trust in those conversations as well. If we are truly asking, then we really need to be listening as well. And, you know, then we'll get a picture. I think actually I learned at the Women's Collective in Perth this week that there's a just transition conversation to be kicked off. And that's not just about the big stories across big sectors in Scotland. That's about all the wee stories, and we could probably think of 20 in this community right now, about how we all transition. And that's the kind of conversation we need to be having as a nation and get behind that positive focus.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jess. Jason?
Can I just jump in? I just really want to echo what everyone else is saying. It's really interesting how everybody's kind of coming up with the same answer. I think if I was given £300,000, the first thing I would do is demand that there were no outputs or outcomes that were demanded and no evaluation forms. That would be the first thing. I think the second thing is that I would set up, or I would maybe facilitate people setting up community hubs so they could learn about direct democracy, and they could also learn about consensus decision making. And so by the time communities have learnt about this, which is something we don't have at the moment at all, we wouldn't be having to convince politicians of anything because we wouldn't need them. And I think everything, you know, who holds the money in the first place? Why have they got that money to give us? Why don't we have it already? You know, and I think, you know, when you get into those kind of conversations, you're moving from a safe space into a braver space where you're kind of willing to be challenged and you can speak, but you have to take responsibility for what you've said. If you say something that people find challenging, you have to own that, you know. And I think, you know, I've been in spaces like that. I mean, I wouldn't say they feel edgy, but they feel challenging. But because everybody's gone in from a consensus decision-making perspective, you find that change grows as a result of that because you're actually talking to people that really disagree with you, although the fundamental core values are exactly the same. So I think what that goes down to is completely disrupt capitalism, get rid of the people that have got all of this money, let's make our own decisions about what we want to do, let's have no outputs and outcomes because we'll decide in 5 years' time what's best for us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, round of applause. We're very, very nearly out of time, as always, which is sad. But we do have one question on the live stream, and I think it would be an awful shame not to do justice to that question. So, Gian, you've been keeping an eye on this for us. If you can tell us what it is.
We've got a question from Anna. She asks, how can we encourage businesses to respond and adapt to the climate crisis?
Anyone want to come in there? Thank you.
So just share a wee bit of local perspective. It's interesting, I've been tuning into some conversations about how to engage with communities on climate change over the last 6 months, and heard people talking about businesses and communities separately. And actually our experience is that, you know, the people who run the businesses in this community are the community, and actually when you've got a space like a cafe, you can profile what those who are in business are doing, the leadership, and there's masses of leadership across different businesses that you wouldn't necessarily know about unless you invite those folk to come and share what they're doing in their own local communities. And actually celebrating and sharing inspiring stories and success, the stories again, initiates that conversation, and is that something which we've learned at a local level, but I think is something which other communities have picked up and shared with us as well.
Yeah, I can take that to the international and national level, which is something else I'm involved with. Stories are hugely powerful, but it's exactly what I said earlier in the answer to one of the other questions. It's using the right language and going to the right place if you want to talk to the businesses. And, you know, businesses are set up generally, if we're talking about a business, a commercial business, to make money. They will have shareholders. You need to talk to them in that language as well, because otherwise they ain't going to give you the time of day, and I've been there. So yes, I would love to change things, but we've got a while to go yet, and we need to still talk that language and use that way. So some of the work I do is with multinational organisations, and it's recognising where they're coming from as well. So but you've got the wonderful examples, and we've got amazing people doing things fantastic out there at a local level and at a bigger level as well. So sharing those stories, because one of the things I come across is people going, oh, but we can't do that, or it's nothing to do with us, when actually you can share the stories of people in a similar field who have done that, and it is doable.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up now, but can we just give a huge round of applause, please, to all of our fantastic speakers? Thank you all. We've been asked to just share a couple of messages. So there was somebody due to be with us from Perth and Kinross Council, but sadly they couldn't make it. But they did want us to make sure that you are aware that they are currently having a community climate consultation, which you can fill out on their website. So please do that. It's important that we feed our voices into that. So yeah, I think that's the website there, and you can find out more about it. The other thing I wanted to let you all know about is that I am week 1 in a new job, which is working with the Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, which is a very long way of saying SCAN, as a Tayside, trying to help coordinate a Tayside hub, a climate hub. And so what that looks like is meeting as many groups who are doing such fantastic things on the ground, and thinking about how we might be able to collaborate and connect and learn lessons with each other in a way that really complements the work people are doing. So I would just really encourage everybody to keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you have a group that you want to get involved in, to come and give me a shout, that would be brilliant. The last thing I have to say is loads of thank yous, because these Climate Beacon events have only been possible through a number of different partners. Big thank you to the Climate Cafés in Dunkeld for hooking us up with this space tonight and all the different things happening in the area. Massive thank you to Birnam Arts and to our tech team up there, James, Adam and Rory. Big clap for them. So another partner is, of course, the Dundee Rep and Scottish Dance Theatre and Creative Dundee's CULTIVATE project, which is fantastic. If you haven't checked that out, you really must. They've got lots of artists commissioned all over Tayside around climate action, working with the community. So definitely check that out. And lastly, just to thank Anna and Clare for helping facilitate and coordinate the Beacons projects. And I must say a belated thank you to Gillian, who was doing your job last week, but I forgot to thank her, which is terrible. So Gillian, if you're out there, thank you very much for your help in our growth. And I hope you all feel that this is just the start of a very big conversation, and that you're feeling inspired tonight to go on, to take action, to get involved in some of these amazing projects, and maybe to start writing your own stories as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. What did I miss? Oh, of course, the Dundee event. How could I miss that? We're due to be in Dundee on the 9th of July. So if you're in the area, tell your friends, tell your families. It would be great to see you all there. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Now, if you've got any food left, now you can finish it.